Hey, Kevin here, Skylabs. Today we want to do a video on how or what connectors you can buy to help connect larger gauge speaker wire or monster style cable to vintage electronics. There's definitely some good options out there, and we're going to get into them right now. Hey, thanks for checking out another video from Skylabs. Please do us a favor and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share it if you can. It really helps us out a lot. Thank you. All right, so speaker gauge. Why does everybody want to use bigger gauge, and why didn't they use bigger gauge back then? That's a long, heated debate. Not really something I think I'm going to get into right now. Um, I am definitely not an expensive cable purchaser. Let's put it that way. Um, I kind of agree with the engineers of the past, and the reason I do is they weren't trying to sell me something. As in, I brought a Marantz 2270 manual just for reference, and there's a reason why those speaker terminals on the receiver and the speakers were small, and it's because they recommended 18 or 16 gauge cable, speaker cable, which is really kind of insane because that is really, really thin wire. And even more so, they recommended lamp cord. There wasn't such a thing as speaker cable. And then, just like everything else, all of a sudden, speaker cable becomes a thing. And like everything else, if you want to sell it for more money, you got to offer something more. So, what do? They increase the size. And there's going to be a lot of people out there that have a completely different opinion on this, and that is just fine. Actually, leave a comment. Go ahead. I'd really appreciate it because I do like to get other people's opinions, and um, once again, it helps spread the word. So let's see, page 3. I'm going to head there now. Page 3, it says, use ordinary 18 gauge 2 conductor lamp cord. May be used for normal distances to about 25 feet between your 2270 receiver and your loudspeakers. For longer lengths, use 16 gauge or heavier wire should be used to ensure optimum speaker performance. So, they're saying 18 gauge up to 25 feet. 18 gauge is so thin. If you guys saw it, you'd laugh. 16 gauge is pretty damn thin, to be honest with you. And so, anyway, there's nothing wrong with using 16 gauge or 18 gauge. That's what the people at Marantz said. Everybody loves Marantz. Hell, we're still using their receivers that are 50 years old today. I doubt they're wrong. So, um, but let's get into connectors just in case you want something thicker. We call it audio jewelry. Um, if you want to dress your system up with some big, fat, heavy cable because you think it looks good or sounds good, go for it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. So here we go. Let's jump into this. So to get all this done, you do need a few tools. I'm going to have links for it, and I would recommend go to Parts Express. They're a smaller company in Ohio. Um, they've got everything you need. They're going to have all the tools, all the connectors, a bunch of really cool stuff. Anyway, especially for speaker DIYers. That's a really great site to go. But for now, you're going to need wire strippers. You're going to need electrical tape. You'll need your connectors, and then you'll need a precision screwdriver, or like an eyeglass screwdriver, just a really thin flat head. And with those, with just that little bit of stuff, we can get a really good tight connection that is not going to be prone to failure, which is our goal. So, all right. So the first connector on my list here is a spade connector, and definitely these have been around a long time. Different variations. You got crimp on style. You've got screw down. There's all different ways to attach wire to these. But the general idea is for those flat-headed screw type terminals. You usually see them on tube equipment from the 60s, early Macintosh used them, Fisher used them. A lot of, geez, it went on for a long time. They're really poor connection in that a lot of times if you're just twisting uh, braided cable down, uh, pieces of copper tend to like to go rogue and touch the other terminal, which is really bad. And the bigger the cable, the more likely that's to happen. So if you're not going to use a spade connector on a screw down type terminal, I would definitely recommend using a small gauge cable, and then also tin it. And what I mean by tinning it is, I would bend the cable into kind of a curve or a half moon, and then I would flow solder on it and give it some rigidity. Um, Land that down to your terminal, screw it down really tight, and that's a really good connection if you don't want to go the spade route. Otherwise, with screw down terminals, I would only use a spade, and I would use a spade over the tin solution as well. Um, these are also really good for the hated Pioneer early 70s, late 60s um, pin style terminals. These things are a nightmare. And I'm glad they got rid of them after 2 or 3 years, because anybody that's owned one of these machines knows that this is a problem. But these spade connectors work really good for this. You just, attach your wire to your spade, plug that into your Pioneer speaker connector, and that's a really solid solution to that. So, yeah, first on the list, spade connectors. You can do quite a bit with this. A lot of speakers out there too use screw down style, like especially older 60s and early 70s speakers. So, spades. And number two, and definitely probably my most used style, would be the mini. This is a 2 millimeter or a mini banana. Um, it's also called a pin connector, however they word it, but those would be the terms I would use to search it. And these are good for like early Marantz, Pioneer, with the push, the spring-loaded push style terminal, where you push the button in, you put your wire, and then you let go of the spring, and it grabs onto whatever's in that hole. Most of those are, 4 millimeters in diameter. So a 2 millimeter pin type connector works beautifully for those things. Um, and that spans a good chunk of the 70s. It wasn't really until the 80s that I think the larger banana connector came really popular, even though those had been around for uh, you see them on Dynacos in the 60s, so it's not like they weren't around. I don't know why it took so long to get popularity, but um, yeah, there's just a slew of JBL. If you look at like L100s, Jubals, 4311s, all those models, they have that hole on that terminal. It can't be any bigger than 3 millimeters. It is super tiny. There's absolutely no way you could get a monster cable, a 10 gauge cable in there. It'd be impossible. You'd have more out than in, and it's just, you don't want that. That's how you end up taking your equipment to a technician, because either a braid touched the other one, or it came loose. That's the important part about having a solid connection, is that at some point you're gonna if I vacuum, I have to move my speaker, and if I move my speaker, I want to make sure that my wires are connected, well enough that I can move that speaker a few inches and not worry about a wire coming loose and touching the other one. Same thing with, a receiver. Something's going to get dropped back there. We all know how this goes. There's a rat's nest behind your receiver or stereo or whatever, and you're gonna have to dig back there with your hand, and you want to make sure all those wires are really well connected. And last but not least, this would be the modern. I should say, I shouldn't say modern, because Like they have been around a long time, but this is what I would consider to be, if somebody says banana connector, I would assume they're referring to this. That is a really good connection. It's really easy to uh, to make the connection, and I can see why it's so popular. If your equipment has this, that is a great way to go. Set of bananas. The other I want to mention, with all of these connectors, especially the spade and the mini pin, a lot of times this older equipment, these terminals were close together. And if these spade connectors touch together, that is no different than two wires touching together. Same with the mini pins. Some of these, the outer casing of this connector could be conductive. And if they touch together because those terminals are too close, you are going to short stuff out, and it is not going to be good. In that case, that's what the electrical tape's for. Put just a little bit of electrical tape on one of them, or make sure some type of barrier that's going to prevent a short, because you definitely don't want that. So yeah, so I think, with those three connection types, plus the tinned wire, I don't think there's anything out there besides maybe Bang & Olufsen. And personally, I don't care about Bang & Olufsen. If you're a Bang & Olufsen person, I'm sorry. You got to deal with their connection types. So that's just part of the fun of Bang & Olufsen, isn't it? Anyway, hope you got something out of this. Leave a comment if I missed something, or if there's something you'd like to add. By all means, please do. I appreciate it, and thanks for watching.